Hello, everybody, and happy time zone to you. This is HR from Happy Valley, and I'm Lydia Parker. I'm a senior in Penn State's hospitality management program, and I'm looking to go into the food service industry once I graduate. Our segment today revolves around women in the hospitality industry and the ever-changing topic of sexual harassment. We've got a great episode lined up for you with a whole industry panel's worth of valuable information and advice, but we'll get to that. Let's start out with some context for the issues we're going to be discussing. According to a 2015 white paper by the Hospitality Industry Pipeline, 70% of hospitality and tourism employees are women. This is contrasted sharply when we look to directors and executives, however, of which a tiny 8 and 20% respectively are women. The large percentage of women in the hospitality industry is important when thinking about sexual harassment, as one review by Remus Illies determined that between 24 and 58% of women have experienced potentially harassing behaviors at work. With such large numbers, especially as the number of women in the workforce increases, the topic remains relevant. When we shift more specifically to the hospitality industry, those numbers grow to 89% of women, according to an article from The Guardian in 2018, which is certainly concerning, especially when we consider all the negative effects that experiencing sexual harassment can have on individuals, as any unwanted behavior that could be considered sexual harassment can lead to mental, physical, and job-related consequences. As management professionals, not only is it our job to make sure that our organizations operate within the law, which harassment of all forms is certainly outside of, but it is also our job to keep our employees happy and healthy to the best of our ability. Now that everyone's got a little bit more background information, let's dive into the rest of the episode. We'll be chatting with some industry professionals, and I'm really looking forward to all the insights they'll be able to provide and their thoughts on how concerns around gender in the workplace are evolving, as well as what they'd like to see change. So I do want to thank everybody for taking the time to come and help me with this project today. I'm really looking forward to it. I think everybody's going to have really interesting things to say. So I sort of want to start with everybody sort of saying a little bit about your current role.
My name is Maria Kim, and I am the Career Services Coordinator for the School of Hospitality Management.
My name is Kirsten Maroney, class of December 2017. I currently am the Sales and Events Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Market.
Awesome, and I'm Ashley Ackright. I'm Director of Operational Excellence and Innovation at Gaylord Rockies Resort and Convention Center.
After our short introductions, we started our conversation with a quick chat about the glass ceiling in the hospitality industry, whether it exists, whether there's a double standard in place, and the ways that we've broken through it so far.
It depends on the company. As you can see that now most of the hospitality industries they did, break through that glass ceiling. But there's still some, and you can see through their leadership, even their online. It's like you can check out their website and you see who's the top, the CEOs and the top leaders, and you'll see that it's still men. When you do see women there, it's kind of like, you're like, wow, this is awesome. There's one. And sometimes you're thinking like, was she just put there for that breakthrough for that reason? Or she's really, really good that she broke that ceiling and really said, you know what, she's amazing. We're going to do this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would definitely say that there's still a glass ceiling for sure in some aspects. Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a director of operations say to me one time, he was like, what do you want to do? Like, this is when I was like an intern. He was like, what do you want to do 10 years down the road? And I was like, oh, I'm like still kind of figuring out, maybe director of food and beverage. And he was like, shoot bigger. He was like, there is such a lack of female GMs right now in the hotel industry that companies are looking for that. And he was like strive for more, strive for bigger, because like, I think that we'll see a big change in the next couple of years coming through in women in more senior leadership positions. So I think there's definitely still more work to be done, but I don't feel like people have closed the door on women yet. Definitely still more work to do. It's nice though, the job that I work at now, the GM of the Pennsylvania market is a female, and she's 30 years old. So it's really exciting to see like a young woman in such a senior leadership position. So it's breaking. We're breaking through.
Yeah, I would agree. In the hotel business specifically, speaking about Marriott, our corporate office is very heavily female. Our exec positions at corporate are very heavily female. Where we're lacking is general managers. And the primary piece that gets in the way there, that I think is limiting our breaking of the glass ceiling, is childcare and what the child rearing age does to potentially set back a career, but also what it does in prioritizing, because GMs are a 24/7 business, and there's a lot of high expectations on availability and time in the office, and that really limits it. Corporate, it's pretty easy to, not pretty easy, it's easier to manage your schedule and your time when a lot of your work is more strategic and can be done remote. And I think we saw that this past year.
I mean, on a really similar subject, what have you guys seen change over the years you've been in the industry? Have you seen anything change? Or were there huge changes from like the start of your career until today?
A little bit has changed, but we're working like Kirsten said, that we're still working through a lot of this. I just feel that it is hard. When I started my career as, a 23-year-old in campus dining, it's food service. So, I was like very much like, I'll take the late shifts. I'll take all of these shifts. No, I'm the youngest one. So I've gotten all of the late shifts, the weekend shifts, the shifts that nobody want to take. I'll take it because I didn't have any priorities to kind of like, watch for. So I don't have any kids yet at that time. Then I, as my career, like everybody else around me was getting promoted. And as you're getting promoted, I'm like thinking, am I still staying in this position? And you have students that did internship programs in our place, in our unit, and you see them succeed and be successful and move up so quickly. And I'm like, why can't I move up quickly? But then I always ask question and say, is it too late for me to move up? Because I'm now, in my 30s and pregnant. Would people hire me because I'm pregnant? Like I'm a woman, and now it's a little bit different of my responsibility. But now what I've seen in the same workplace, because I still have friends that work there, that like women are starting to take off vacation days, taking their kids to like Disney and doing things that I was like, how did you take off work? When I was doing this, I didn't know. For me, you could take off work, but I just feel guilty leaving my coworkers kind of like not being there at work. But the change is that now women are prioritizing their family.
I agree, Maria. It's slightly changing. I think the importance of balance and making sure you take time for family is slightly changing. I think some of the older mindset and the more traditional mindset leaders are realizing they have to change. But it's knowing that some of them still aren't happy about it. So while the company may be moving in a certain direction, there may be people who still have an unconscious bias around what it means to be dedicated to your company, what it means to be dedicated to your role, what a work day looks like, feels like, and sounds like. So it's knowing your audience, it's managing up, but it's also sticking up for yourself and making sure that you're doing right by yourself and your family, and you're not sacrificing that for the sake of a job.
Do you guys think that there is a bias towards women and then taking time off versus men taking time off?
I think it it does exist, because I remember when I worked and my son got sick, they told me, they said, your husband can take off work too and stay home with your son instead of just you taking off all the time. So to them, I mean, at first I was like, they're right, but then when I really thought of it, when I sat down and I'm like, no, I want to be able to stay home. It's there, but I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I've experienced it. So there is still that unconscious bias that they assume that. For me, when my boss told me that, I was like, you're right. But at the same time, when I really thought of it, I'm like, wow, that was just very kind of, that was such an unconscious bias that you just said that. But again, the retaliation also that people are scared of, from if you would voice yourself and say, why would you say that? It's back then, like Ashley said, is a lot different than now, when you can actually voice and say, no, I'm taking off and I don't appreciate that you said something like that. It's a lot different by back then, because, even then, when you say back then, people would think like, wow, like 20 years ago or 15 years ago. But in just a short amount of time, when all of these movements are coming through, companies have changed. But Ashley's correct. People don't change still. Their mindset is still there for the old school way.
I see more so a bias around what taking time off means, especially in this digital world, right? Of a bias of, oh, that person really disconnects, as an implication that that's a bad thing, that the person isn't checking email or isn't willing to dial into a meeting because they're off. And I see that bias happen a lot, of statements of an implication that that person doesn't care as much about their role or isn't as dedicated to their role, because, or they go dark on their days off. And a lot of people still manage days off very differently, in that sense of, some people are still connected and doing calls. And hospitality industry, this is even more so because we're a 24/7 business.
That's so true, Ashley.
It's so true.
It's so true. You're like, I'm out of the office tomorrow, but you're like, but why you're still picking up calls? But doesn't make you guys feel guilty though, that when you're off and you see, like, your phone ringing, or you see that there's a meeting in your department that you can't attend, but it's your day off. Like, don't you feel that guilt? But really, it's just you that feel that way and nobody else.
Yes, 150 million times percent yes. And it's such a thing that I personally want to work on, being better and just being like, you're allowed to take time off. And listen, if COVID taught me anything, and being furloughed for 6 months, it's that, like, it's okay to really truly unplug. When I worked in banquets, and it was like, I had weird days off. I wasn't off, Saturday, Sunday. I was off like Tuesday, Thursday. And obviously the hotel still runs during that time. So I felt the need to still like plug in, even on my like actually scheduled days off, not even days that I requested off, just like regularly scheduled days. And you still feel the need to plug in. And I'm learning now, as you get older, you're like, I have to make time for myself. I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to take off. I'm allowed to like unplug and relax, because then I'm a better leader. I'm a better worker. I can sell more. I can do more when I come back, because I've actually taken time for my mental health.
No, I think that's really important. And I think it's something a lot of people are learning right now. Next, we transitioned into a little conversation about sexual harassment in the workplace and what sorts of advice these women had for those of us entering the industry on dealing with both sexual harassment and gender bias in the workplace. I actually want to circle back around to something that Maria said. You were talking about all the different movements and stuff that are coming up in the past few years and really trying to change things. I know one of the big ones was the Me Too movement. It's gotten a little bit quieter recently. Do you guys think that there's still a conversation to be had around, sexual harassment?
Yeah, I think we do, but not a lot of people that are victims from this is still comfortable on stepping up. I feel that in our industry, because, especially in food service, you might think that, the cook is okay to say stuff like that to you because it's kind of like stressful, but it's really not. But when you're more in a scene where it's like you work in a kitchen, you work in I, if I was in that situation, I don't know if I'm still comfortable and say, I know that was not right, but is it okay for me to report that?
It's definitely still there, and it is early to be talked about because I think a lot of people, to Maria's point, are still uncomfortable with the conversation around it. I mean, we can't even talk about the conversation around gender until not too long ago. We still struggle to talk about race in the workplace. So it's are we gonna piss people off? Are we gonna ruffle feathers by having this conversation? And by having the conversation, are we also acknowledging that it's happening in our building and in our company? And if we acknowledge that it's happening, is there egg on our face for not doing more? From a operations standpoint, it's the little things that certainly add up or can escalate, that you don't know if those little things are bad enough to go to HR, or if there will be that repercussion, or if HR is going to take it serious. So that's I think the difficult part and the slippery line. Our industry is also well known for spending a lot of time in our buildings and in our restaurants and hotels, and therefore a lot of our people end up meeting their significant others in our buildings. So that adds a whole nother element, that our industry does that more than a lot of others do. So that creates a different dynamic to this conversation of when something may be reciprocated or not, because it's allowed and permissible if it is reciprocated, but can be a slippery slope of where that line is drawn.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much more to add than, like, yes, it definitely still exists, and it probably will always exist. It's just where will time come where we find a really good way of conquering it or dealing with it in a good way. And it's a really, really fine line to toe.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah.
That's crazy. I was like, I got a little emotional when Ashley said that, because I was like, oh my gosh, that is true. Like, when is it time for you not to be scared? When are you not feeling scared of the retaliation? When do you think it's not kind of like just a comment, or, if it's a little thing? I was like, you're right. Like, I just got a little emotional. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to cry in this.
On that subject, do you guys think that there's something that we can do as people usually entering into like more managerial positions and supervisory positions? Is there anything we can do to help people, understand what is and isn't okay, to maybe alleviate some of that fear in going to like HR if it is a problem?
One thing that I've always talked about in being in a leadership position is that you don't have to go to HR. If you, as a leader, create a safe space for someone to come to you if they feel like they have a problem, whether you're HR or not. And then as like a young leader, just knowing what to do with that information and how to help them get support that they need if it's, a really strong issue or whatever that looks like.
Make sure you let the staff know that is not tolerated at all. Having that safe space is really important too. And trainings is important as well. Once we do these trainings, and we have a lot of international students as well that work with us, once we have these trainings, people are starting to realize what the unconscious bias that they said before, and they kind of like watch what they say, because now everyone is aware of these things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think, Kristen, your point about every leader should really be a open door and a welcome, I think is super important, because depending on the level that employee is at, they may not feel comfortable going to HR. There may be a lack of trust or a potential feeling of retaliation, whether it's HR or their direct leader. maybe also retaliation of not being able to move up and being termed as a sensitive female that takes things too far and too serious and has no sense of humor, and those type of stigmas that come with it that you then fear would potentially hold back your career. I had a situation in a job I worked at where it was the head of our department who was the one doing the sexual harassment. I thought I was getting fired when I got pulled into our general manager's office. And I was ready. I was ready to walk in and find another job that day. And that's sad that that's even the feeling going into it. I think women being in leadership roles will also help that stigma, because at that point it was an old boys club, and that GM and that particular leader had been very close, had known each other for years, and had supported each other for years. So that's why I felt that way, because I felt there wasn't diversity at the top.
On that note, is there any advice you guys would want to give to people entering into the industry? Women entering into the industry at any level, gentlemen entering the industry, managers entering entry level, just anything, directions to point people in, etc.
I can probably give them advice to let them know that, find that person that you can really trust. Also, find that leader that you can mentor you, finding that kind of like person that says, do this, it's not the end of you, or don't let them do that because you don't have a master's degree. You have so much more experience than these people. So having that person to kind of like be your ally and be your cheerleader, find that. Never stop reaching for what you want to do. Now, because of that person, I'm very driven now to like do my master's degree and do what I want to do, and not be scared and always be fearful of the title. Titles mean nothing. If you are that person that no one respects you, title doesn't mean anything. It could be the big CEO and you are not that person. Because as a CEO, remember where you came from. You were just as that person when you started, being that role that you were in, and now you're in a CEO. Don't be in that level and say, I'm a CEO, I'm up top, and here are my employees. Your employees should not be like my employees. I never say that, even though when I was the manager, I always said my coworker. And that just makes, everybody else feels a lot more united, and you're in the teamwork. And your role as a title is you're there to kind of put out fires, but in reality is you're actually working with these people as well. So that's my advice.
Wow, that just spoke to me on like a huge level. She's so right. If you have to sit there every day and say, well, you have to listen to me because I'm the boss, you're not a very good boss. You have to trust your team. You have to empower them to do the right thing. And if you're constantly being, I'm the boss, that's not going to be productive. My piece of advice would be to just have confidence in yourself, especially in women. I feel like, I don't want to speak for all women because everyone is different and every man is different too, but I feel like a lot of women go into roles and they just feel they want to second guess themselves, and they don't feel like maybe the decisions they're making are the right ones, or that they feel like they don't know anything. And if I could give any advice back to myself or to anyone moving forward, it's just be confident in the decisions that you're making. They might not all be right, and that's okay. You'll learn from them, you'll move on, and you'll make the right decisions next time. So just have faith in yourself. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think our incoming leaders and tomorrow's leaders are going to come in with almost a blindness to gender bias in the workplace. I think even my generation did. And because we were blind to it, we didn't necessarily see as many of the poor actions and didn't invest the time into lifting others as we grew, because we didn't think it was a problem. Because our perception was, as I go through hospitality school at Penn State, it's all females. It's mostly females that are teaching us, it's mostly females sitting around me, we're equal. This is fine. And not necessarily looking around us with inquisitive eyes as we moved into corporate America and understanding that it's not fine and it's not equal. And it really took until I was in a higher level position at the hotel that I started to hear the comments of, oh, well, we're about to hire our first female general manager in the brand. Now, mind you, this was in 2020, which is kind of sad for a brand that's been around for a long time. But I still don't like when those statements are made, because we're hiring a rock star general manager who happens to be female. But there's also, it's the same parallel that goes into race discussion, right? If you say that you're colorblind in a race discussion, then you're not acknowledging the disparities that exist. So my advice to those growing in their career and starting their career out of school is to view the world and your company and your department and your leader with inquisitive eyes, as opposed to coming in with rose-eyed glasses, or coming in with a feeling that if I just ignore it because I am a female and I know I'm going to do good and I have self-confidence, that may be true for you and that may allow you to grow, but know that that is not universal across the workplace. And it's also your obligation to help others around you grow.
You said something about corporate America, which actually leads directly into the next question I wanted to ask, which is, if you guys could see any changes in organizations in the hospitality industry, what would you like to see?
Well, as a mom, I would love to see having childcare, available. I remember when I started to work, when I worked, I asked, can I send my kid to the daycare? And they're like, yeah, you can. But, would they be a discount because it is within the university? No, you actually get charged more if you work in the university for daycare. So I think having opportunities for women to say, I can leave, my son or my kids in the facility while I'm working, it would give them a chance to kind of shine a little bit more and be like, wow, this company is, corporate America has changed so much, where they provide something for women. Yeah, I think as a mom, I would love to have some sort of daycare facility or childcare help.
I agree. I think we need to, in corporate America, continue to figure out how to make balance better. And, some companies do this better than others. I work for Gaylord Hotels, and our culture has always been putting stars first. And something that cool and different that they did at our hotels is we had a car mechanic. And, when we say corporate America in your question, corporate America is also the blue collar America per se, that is every hotel and every restaurant. And is it practical for a restaurant to have a car mechanic? No, of course not. But what partnerships can you do? Help your team win and help your team balance.
Yeah, I like what obviously Maria and Ashley had to say. Yeah, balance is huge. And just, yeah, from working at a small business, it is interesting. What can they do to show us that they value us as employees? And I mean, maybe it's as simple as just hey, I have a dentist appointment in this morning, and they're like, no problem, take the morning off. That sounds so simple, but that is something that at previous jobs that I didn't have the luxury of doing, and it was really hard to schedule a dentist appointment. Just showing that you value the people that work for you, and that you're going to do the best that you can to help them. And then going back to what Ashley said, inclusion is huge. I mean, just trying to support an environment that is inclusive to everyone, and whatever that looks like. And that's a goal that I think everyone is striving to get to. Every company, every person, and how we can be the most inclusive and most understanding people that we can be. Because when we are, then everyone wins.
But if you really, it's a lot for you to really think that you can fix it yourself. It really takes the whole place to help you with that. So it really starts from you.
I want to thank you guys again. I think this has been a great conversation, and I loved hearing everything that you guys had to say on all of these different subjects. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me a little bit today. And that's all we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into HR from Happy Valley, a Penn State University podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation about women in hospitality and that it has given you something to think about. Have a lovely day.